All right, everybody, it is 10 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining the Washtenaw County Road Commission's virtual construction information meeting about the Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile Road Roundabout that we're going to build this summer. My name is Emily Kaiser, and I'm the WCRC's communications manager. I'll be the meeting host along today with our project manager. So this morning I'm going to go over some housekeeping items before we turn it over to the project manager for the presentation, and then we'll open the meeting up for your questions. Mark McCullough is our project manager for this work, and his contact information is listed on the slide here along with his beautiful photo. So just a couple housekeeping items. So the meeting audio and video is being recorded right now, and it will be posted to wcroads.org in the next day or two. We will send a link to the meeting recording to the project email list once it has been posted. After Mark's presentation, you will be asked to virtually raise your hand during the question and answer period. I will provide instruction at that time on how to do so from either your computer, the Zoom app, or your touch tone phone. The chat feature for this meeting is turned on. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to ask it in chat and we will address it during the Q&A period. You can find the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. So now with that, I will turn it over to Mark.
Good morning, and thank you, Emily. And just want to give full credit to Emily for that beautiful mugshot of me. That would not have been possible without her assistance. So glad to see we have such a large turnout for this virtual public meeting. It's a blessing, you know, in some ways, very small silver linings, I think is the better term, that, you know, though COVID has put a lot of constraints on us and how we do business, it has promoted things such as virtual meetings to be able to interact more with the public, to be able to give information and communicate with them. So in a small way, that is a little silver lining. So we're here to talk about the Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile Roundabout that's going to be built this summer. And Emily, if you don't mind going to the next slide there, please. Great. So yes, as we're talking about the, the COVID situation, we all understand the constraints that are placed upon us right now. Governor Whitmer has placed road construction and has deemed it as an essential task that it be completed by state, federal officials, including the locals, being the County Road Commission. So that's why we're proceeding with building this project this summer. Precautions will need to be taken to protect our employees and safety just as much as it's necessary to protect your safety should you need to interact with one. So please do not approach an employee, respect the 6-foot distance, and we'll find somehow some way to communicate with you, whether it be calling me as project manager, we'll figure something out. So if you can respect that, we greatly appreciate that. Next slide, please, Emily. All right, let's give a little bit of background here. Some of you that have been in the area for a while know this too well. Once upon a time in 2013, I was presenting at the Salem Township Hall to present a roundabout to the group. And as some of you may recall, that roundabout was a little bit larger than the one that we're going to be building this summer. And what that ended up doing, that larger roundabout ended up having to, it created constraints on property owners. We're at the point where we needed land and to build the footprint of the roundabout. And being sensitive to the country store at the corner, northeast corner there, we were utilizing a footprint that was more or less taken on the west side as far as land needs. But we ran into some difficulties with the property owner when it came to purchasing the right of way, and ultimately the budget just was not there to be able to come to terms to purchase that right of way. So ultimately what we ended up doing was returning the grant money that was given to us at that time, because it just was not budgeted and we were too far apart on a number, and it just had to be, the project had to be shelved. Well, since that time, the Washtenaw County Road Commission has been involved in developing a new kind of roundabout, and we didn't invent it, but we're definitely embracing it. And it's called a mini or smaller type roundabout, where the footprint is not as big as the traditional roundabouts that once upon a time we built, but at the same time, it still offers the capacity and the safety benefits that the larger ones can be built. Now, they can't be built everywhere, but in this case, it can be built here. And what that does is tremendously is reduce costs. It reduces impacts to the property owner, and it reduces the amount of time it takes to build it. So these are all win-win-wins for the community, for the road commission, so that we can utilize precious resources for other needs that are out there. So it is what we call a rural money. It's surface transportation rural funds. Think of it as every time you go to the gas pump, you pay a tax. I believe it's almost close to 19 cents per gallon. That goes to Washington, D.C., goes into a general fund. Well, it goes into a special transportation fund. And then that money then gets divvied up into states, which then gets divvied up into regions in the state. So our portion of that is coming back, and we're utilizing that portion, and it's an 80-20 match. So 80% of that money is coming from Washington, D.C. that we put into the gasoline pumps that went to Washington, coming back, and then the 20% is matching dollars coming from the general fund. The bid was secured by Cadillac Asphalt. Michigan Department of Transportation solicited those bids and awarded that contract to Cadillac Asphalt, and that bid was $880,000. Next slide, Emily, please. So why a roundabout as opposed to a traffic signal or just leave it alone? Well, we know the leave it alone option creates problems because South Lyon to Ann Arbor is a commuter route, and it creates significant backups in the AM heading southbound and heading northbound in the PM. So the status quo of just leaving it alone really isn't a desirable for many people, as it impacts them from a time perspective. So from that standpoint, we had to choose, all right, roundabout versus traffic signal. Well, the problem that we were encountering with the traffic signal was, in order to facilitate a footprint that was going to be functional and that was still going to provide those capacity needs, it was going to create big constraints on the party store, the country store on the northeast corner. So it's like, this isn't going to truly work out for us. So that's ultimately why we went towards the roundabout. But the good news is that the roundabout does slow traffic. And because unlike a traffic signal where people are running a red light at high speeds when creating a T-bone collision, the low impacts that if and when a collision does occur at a roundabout, for the most part, just creates property damage only crashes. So in other words, you're calling your insurance agent up, you're not going to the hospital or seeing a doctor. The roundabouts does move traffic very efficiently, and it also reduces the congestion. So that's a win there. And then also the mini roundabout that we're putting in, mini only in the terms of smaller, so don't be scared by the term mini. It reduces the impacts on the neighboring parcels. Next slide, Emily, please. Benefits, like we were talking about, the safety component of it because of the low speeds that occur, and also because they're not at 90-degree angles when you're colliding with one another, if and when that does happen. We talked about the congestion mitigation. Another benefit is that we're just going to get new pavement out there. So that's always a plus. We always, that's been, frankly, a demand from the public to our politicians, fix the roads. Hence why Whitmer had that slogan. But it's one of those things that's going to be fulfilled as part of this project. Next slide, Emily, please. All right, so let's do a little bit of a deep dive here on the project overview. So currently right now, if you're driving through that intersection, you'll see a contractor here, a contractor there. Those are working on the utilities. So Detroit Edison, Consumers Energy for gas. You have Charter Communications for cable out there, and AT&T. Those are the four primary players at that intersection. So they had some issues with conflicts that we were going to have with our infrastructure that we're going to be putting in that intersection this summer. So in order to balance all that out, they're out there currently moving their items around, moving their assets, infrastructure around so that we'll no longer be in conflict. So starting in June, so a matter of weeks now, we will be installing a single lane, one lane roundabout. It'll construct curb and gutter around the circumference of the islands, at both the splitter islands, the center island, and around the intersection itself. We will install, at the proximity of the intersection, we'll have storm sewer, but we'll also be using ditching as we get further out away from the intersection itself. There will be a crosswalk built on the east leg of the intersection as requested by a couple of the property owners there. And we will be installing street lighting at the intersection. Next slide, please, Emily. All right, so here's a footprint of the intersection. You can see the party store / country store, general store on the northeast corner there. And it's more or less going to be built on center. The diameter of the intersection itself, the circle of it's going to be around 92 feet. So relatively smaller compared to what it was in 2013 being proposed at 140 feet. So we're able to really squeeze that down, but still provide the benefits. And we've got quite a few of these on the south side of Washtenaw County that's demonstrated to work really well and be very efficient. Next slide, please, Emily. Okay, so I'll give you a few visuals here of what's going to happen along the way. So what you're seeing here, it's a term called pulverizing, crushing, and shaping. So getting rid of the existing pavement out there is an expense. Okay, so we got to take time to pick it up, put it in a truck, haul it away, and take it probably to a landfill. Well, that's an expense that's incurred. So instead of doing that, in a rural environment such as 7 Mile and Pontiac Trail, we can use this as really good base material. So we crush it. Think of it as a giant garden rototiller just used for roads. And it pulverizes that pavement into looks like dirt, frankly. When we use that as base material, we shape it. Next slide, please, Emily. So what we do is we shape it, we get a nice crown in the road, and then it's being prepared enough for it to put storm sewer in and place curb and gutter as what you're seeing here. So these are forms that are going to be placed likewise at Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile in order to place curb and gutter. This is an approach. This is a splitter island that you would be seeing as you approach the roundabout itself. Next slide, Emily, please. And then here's the after product of after it's been poured. So this intersection will have red in the middle so that it is a visual cue to drivers as they're approaching the roundabout that there's something there, that it's a visual, subtle cue to be able to inform the driver, hey, you need to slow down as you're approaching that intersection. Next slide, please, Emily. And here's a picture of the center island. This one here is at Salem Church in Wagner, so it's a little bit bigger. Ours will be a little bit smaller, but not that you maybe have a sense of scale in this picture, but nonetheless, they're comparable. Next, back up, Emily. Important point. So you notice on this slide here is that it's mostly flat, okay? It is going to be raised 3 to 4 inches. Reason for that is it allows trucks and farm equipment to be able to turn directly left at the intersection. Because the footprint of the roundabout itself is tighter, it does provide a few constraints to the big trucks, the 18-wheelers as we like to call them, or the combines that are out and about in the fall at harvest time. So this design feature allows those maneuvers to be able to go left around it. School buses aren't going to need to use it for the most part. If not in the most part, they won't need to use it. Garbage trucks will not need to use it. And for sure, the F-150s and the sedans, they'll just be able to drive all around it because you'll see a visual cue that it's going to be 3-4 inches higher. So you'll circulate counterclockwise around the center island. Next slide, please, Emily. And this is near completion of Salem Church and Wagner. As you're approaching the roundabout, you can see the center island, the yield signs in place as it will look somewhat like this once Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile is completed. Next slide, please, Emily. And then here's an aerial view from drone footage of what it would look like minus 4 crosswalks out there. We just have one type of crosswalk on the east leg. So traffic, when you come up to the roundabout there, you would yield to traffic already in the roundabout to your left. Once there's a safe gap, you enter and you make your maneuver, whether it be left, right, or through to go northbound, southbound, eastbound, westbound, depending on what leg of the intersection you're at. Next slide, please, Emily. All right, so timelines. We're going to start in June. Now, it's a little bit vague right now. The contract that we had in place was to start June 15th. The contractor has asked that he start earlier, Cadillac Asphalt, and we found no reason to say no. He is attempting to finalize his schedule with his subcontractors to be able to start as soon as June 1st because the utilities have all informed us they will be out of the way at that point. So that's a good news because it'll just mean that we're opening the intersection sooner as opposed to later, potentially, should we run into bad weather like we did last year. So with that, Emily is going to be communicating to the public as far as when we'll exactly start, and stay tuned to that date. Plan is to be completed in middle of August. If we start sooner, I project that that will be moved up to the beginning of August. Contractors will work Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Probably less than that, meaning on the tail end, probably wrap things up at 5, but you never know. Sometimes they do work to that point. Next slide, Emily. So impacts to traffic. So except for access to the corner general store, the intersection will be closed to all traffic for approximately 8 weeks. So what does that mean? It means that if you live in South Line and you want to head southbound into Ann Arbor to get to work, you're not going to be able to get to that intersection. Primarily, we're working out the details with the contractor. Access to the corner general store and those residents on the east leg is going to be provided from the east, okay? But if you're on, say, Pontiac Trail on the west leg, you're not going to be able to get access to the party store. You're going to be able to have to follow around, because if we were to provide access to get from any direction to the party store, it would just create situations where people are just going to cut through all the time, creating an unsafe environment, creating a potential safety hazard to themselves, and delaying the project, because every time they hit a construction stake, it sets us back that we got to restake that, and that takes time. So that's hence why we're going to be restricting access to residents and property owners from one direction. All right, next slide, please, Emily. So here's a general scope here of the detail, the posted routes that are going to be provided. So if you are coming from 6 Mile Road, or excuse me, if you're coming from 7 Mile Road, you're going to have to essentially use a detour route that's going to consist, get my bearings here right. So you're going to use Dixboro, you're going to use 6 Mile Road, you're going to use Angle Road in order to get back to 7 Mile Road. And likewise, if you're heading north and south, you're going to utilize a detour route that's 6 Mile, Dixboro, and 8 Mile Road if you're on Pontiac Trail. So the question that often comes up is, do I absolutely have to follow this route? Well, we post detour routes and try to utilize pavement as much as possible for the commercial traffic. So the answer to the question is no, you can take any route you want, but we have to choose one, and these are the ones that we try to typically choose. So that will be the posted detour routes that are given to the public. You'll see signs posted along the way that will be able to guide people to get to their intended destinations. Next slide, please, Emily. All right, construction details. So people that live within the project limits, your mail will be delivered. We will work with the mail service to figure that out. Trash pickup is typically, you would put your pet trash out to the front of your yards. And then what we tell the contractor to do is, hey, take that trash, move it outside the project limits. And then at the end of the day, take the containers back to the person's front yard so that they can then take it to wherever they store it for the rest of the week. Make sure that you know, interaction as a pedestrian, that's also something that's sometimes tricky. We ask that you minimize that as much as possible. In fact, don't do it at all for your own safety if possible. But if there's such special circumstances that need to be worked out, you can always contact me and we can try to find a solution. At the end of the project, you'll notice that your yard potentially is brown because it's that topsoil in front of it. We do restore those yards back to a condition where grass needs to be grown. That is a condition in the contract that's placed upon the contractor. So it will take some time for that yard to be reestablished. So after the project has been completed, we will keep a visual eye on your yards to make sure that the contractor is completing their work as necessary for your yard to be back so grass grows. Next slide, please, Emily. So as far as a reminder, when the roundabout does open to traffic, it's important that you slow down on each approach, that you look to your left as traffic is going counterclockwise within the roundabout. When no traffic is present, proceed slowly through the intersection. But when traffic is present, you yield. And that just means you wait your turn. When there's a safe gap that's present at the intersection, then enter the roundabout and continue your maneuver. Next slide, Emily. So if you need to find out more, you can visit this project page that Emily has set up for a communications aspect, or you can contact, so that link will take you to a special page, or you can also contact me at that number there, or email me at that link there below. Next slide, Emily. So with that, that's the end of this presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Emily to moderate, and we can go into Q&A.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, just as a reminder, we do have some questions through chat, so we'll get to those as well. But just as a reminder, if you do want to ask a question at this time, we ask that you virtually raise your hand. To do that, if you're viewing the meeting on your computer, first make sure to click Join Audio, and then you can raise your hand by clicking the Participants button at the bottom of your screen, and then the Raise Hand button at the bottom right of your screen. If you dialed into the meeting from your touch-tone phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. As the meeting host, I will unmute and participants one at a time who have raised their hand. I will announce your username or last 4 digits of your phone number when it's your turn to speak. We're happy to answer as many questions as possible, but please be respectful of each other's time. If your question is answered before you're called on, you can lower your hand by clicking the lower hand button or dialing *9 again. All right, so if you want to raise your hand now, now's the time. We'll start. We don't have any raised hands at this point, but we do have a lot of questions in chat, Mark, so we can start there. Okay. The first question is, if people are driving over the center design, like you were talking about the center circle, is that going to lead to a quicker deterioration or breakup of that center? Does the design call for more denser material in that center to prevent that? What do we do with that?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So no, it will not deteriorate it because it's designed with the beefier cross section to be able to sustain those loads from the heavier traffic. So you will not see a premature breakup from that.
Okay, great. Then we've got a question from Jill. Why only one crosswalk?
The reason for the east leg was because there is homeowners that live on that leg, and they do, in particular one instance, an individual walks daily to the party store, so we took that into consideration, and we felt that that was a reasonable accommodation to be made. However, when you look at the west and north of the east leg, frankly, there is little to no pedestrian movement on those legs, and it was just not feasible for us to include that into the design.
Thanks, Mark. We've got a couple questions about the design, so I'm going to go back to that slide just so we can show people as we're talking. So the next question is about, will there be 2 lanes at each entrance, like we showed in one of our example pictures? I guess there's just some confusion if there'll be a right turn pocket or if it's just 1 lane.
That's an excellent question. So it'll just be 1 lane. It'll be 1 lane on each side of those red slivers that you see. Those are called your splitter islands. There will not be a dedicated right or left turn lane. All maneuvering will be conducted from a single lane. This really reduces any complications that there are with the roundabout when you just have one choice to be made. So it works out very well when we can provide that in a design.
Thanks, Mark. I think it's a great example too, because we do show a lot of example pictures to help you kind of get an idea of what to expect. But as Mark will tell you, every roundabout is unique. And so they're designed for that specific area, what traffic we expect to go in there. So everyone's a little different. So those photos we showed are just as examples. All right, so David had the same question, a single lane entering. Yep, it'll be single lane in all 4 directions. Colleen is wondering, will the country store be open during construction?
To my knowledge, they will be, but I can't speak on behalf of them.
Yeah, and there's just so much going on with all the COVID situation as well. And so we are providing access to customers to the store, right, Mark?
Yes, absolutely.
Jill has the question of where will the detour / road closed sign be coming from the east, at Angle and 7 Mile?
Yeah, so there'll be a series of signs that will be placed. That's how we typically do it, so that if a driver incidentally misses one, that there's a second set so that they don't get right up to the project limits and see the road closed. You'd be amazed how many people drive past 3 sets of signs and say, I never saw them, but nonetheless, they are there. But those signs will be, yes, they should be a series of signs starting at that intersection.
Great. Rick has the question of, will the crosswalk have pedestrian controlled lights to stop traffic?
At this time, no, it will not.
All right. And then Deborah has the question of, what watershed does this project impact or go to?
Well, water currently outlots to the, as it is today, to the east and to the south and the west. And we will primarily be utilizing those where you see the wetlands to the west. And it's basically going to maintain the existing outlots that are there today. So frankly, I think it is more or less going in all directions, and we're going to maintain that.
Okay, CM has the question of, is there a future plan for a roundabout at the intersection of North Territorial and Dixboro traffic tends to pick up there as well, which could potentially worsen with a more efficient flow from traffic at this new roundabout.
Currently, to my knowledge, that is not in the either long-range plan and it's definitely not in the 5-year but a 5-year capital improvement plan. But there is a roundabout on the books for 2022 at the intersection of 7 Mile and North Territorial Roads. So that will help alleviate traffic on that Pontiac Trail corridor going from South Lyon to Ann Arbor in 2022. So there will be a public information meeting on that coming up probably within a few months. We're just beginning the design phase on that, so not a lot of details to share at this time.
Okay, then Justin has the question, will this lighten traffic at the intersection of Pontiac Trail and North Territorial Road?
Will it lighten traffic? It should be, frankly, the same in my judgment.
Okay, Max is wondering if there'll be a copy of the presentation sent over. Max, yep, no, there will be. We will be posting a recording of the presentation to the project page on wcroads.org. And then we'll also be sending out a link to it to anybody who's subscribed to receive project updates via email. And we'll show you how to subscribe to those, but you could just go to wcroads.org and find the project page, and you can subscribe right there to receive those email updates. All right, Deborah is wondering, they're concerned about light illumination. Can you please address this? How will this aspect of the project impact the immediate homeowners?
Well, how would it impact it? For the most part, the lights are designed to go down, shine down on the intersection and the pavement itself, as opposed to spilling out behind and in front, so going on properties. So it would be disingenuous for me to say that it won't be a change in character that's out there today. However, it is, frankly, you'll probably find out it's not as intrusive as it might seem in your mind. It is not the type of bulbs that we're using that projects light out in 360 degrees, but reflecting down on that intersection. And it's important to have that. One, the state mandates it. They won't let us build this without it. But two, in fairness to the state, it is a good thing to provide out there so that people do have a visual of the roundabout during nighttime conditions. So all said, I think it's the best balance that we can provide that's provides the best of both worlds.
Okay, and Mark, just to be, if we were putting a traffic signal there, we would have to illuminate the intersection with a traffic signal as well, right?
I believe that is our typical standard where we do put mast arms out there to, they call them Cobra heads, where they deflect light down. Yes, I do believe that to be the case.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've done a traffic signal intersection. So.
Yeah, you're our roundabout guy. So then Rick has a question of, must a car stop if a pedestrian is in the crosswalk? How will traffic know to yield to the pedestrian?
So there will be, good question. So there will be signs present that will say for demonstrating that there's a crosswalk to be there. By state law, it is required that the driver yield to the pedestrian within the crosswalk. And that's the beginning point that we'll have there. If during time marches on, that is discovered that that is insufficient, we can take with help with our traffic and safety division, we can investigate and see if there's something further that can and should be done to improve the situation.
Okay, and just asking for some clarity from a couple people. Mark, where are we building the next roundabout in this area? You'd mentioned a project in 2022.
That would be at the intersection of Pontiac Trail and North Territorial Road.
Okay, just for clarity, I think you said Pontiac Trail and 7 Mile earlier.
My apologies. So Edith's Market and the Floral Coffee Shop, if that helps, if that's the intersection.
Great. And then we've got another question from Deborah. Several mature trees were removed from the front of our property. Will there be funds provided for replacing these trees?
Unfortunately, no. I believe, Deborah, that was not in the project scope of this intersection improvement project.
Okay. Jill has a question here from the homeowners in Salem Farm subdivision off of 7 Mile. We don't have sidewalks and we have a lot of families that walk/ride bikes on our streets. How can you prevent people from cutting through our subdivision to Tower Road during construction?
I don't have a visual of where in particular this subdivision is. It's definitely something I can look into, but to be candid, there's not a lot I can do. People are people, and short of the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office patrolling the situation for people speeding through the neighborhood, assuming that these are public roads, there's little one can do in these types of instances. We try to set up a detour route that makes the most sense so that people don't short circuit through neighborhoods. And in this is the case, this is the best solution we could come up with in order to minimize that.
Okay, and Mark, it looks like Deborah has some more specific questions about her property. If she provided her contact information, I'm sure we could reach out to you directly, Deborah, to have that conversation. If
Sure.
you want to provide your contact information in the chat just to me privately, or you can email that to Mark. We've got his contact information there. Is there anybody, nobody has raised their hands yet. Is there anybody that would like to raise their hand and ask a question virtually? Remember, you can do that by clicking the raise hand button on the right side of your screen, or by clicking *9 if you've dialed in with your touch tone phone. We've got a raised hand here. I'm going to unmute the number ending in 2887. You are now unmuted. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, hi. My name is Eric Fitzpatrick, and my concern, along with Deborah's, and a couple of months ago we had a meeting. There was 3 other parties as well about the concern with the lighting. Now I know Mark spoke to them. I got a few points to bring up, but Mark brought up the idea that the state mandates the lighting. First of all, would it be a possibility to request a variance? And there's just some of the things to consider. 3 parties had concern with the last meeting, 3 separate parties. The whole idea about visibility of the oncoming roundabout when the person approaches. It seems like that could be achieved through reflectors and signage, and also getting, not having the street lights would, have less tax dollars would have to be put on that. But one of the big things is, we got to remember that this is a rural setting, and a lot of people come out there, such as myself, to get away from that sort of thing. And I guess basically the whole idea is it possible just not to have the street lights? And another thing, another gentleman at the last meeting brought up that some of these roundabouts, trucks or whatever would hit the street lights would go down, and it was considerable time before the situation was fixed, the pole cleaned up, put back up or whatever. But bottom line is, it seems like there's a lot of concern about these lights. And I would just like to see it being handled a little more aggressively as far as researching the possibility of not having the lights. And, it looks like the biggest thing is possibly looking into a variance. But I just want to put that on the radar because, number one, obviously I would like not to see the lights installed for various reasons, some of the things I had on there. And from the previous meeting and this meeting, I'm not alone in this. And it's just, there's a lot of things that make sense for the lights not to be installed. So I'm just throwing that out there.
No, those are all fair points, and definitely appreciate the standpoint. If I am understanding, if I recall correctly, you live, if not in the area, you live within the project limits as well.
Yeah.
I get it. I totally understand that. It's a change. And so for me to try to downplay that, that wouldn't be right. But here's the scenarios that we run into. The problem that, as far as the variance goes, unfortunately, that ship has sailed. We are past that point where the state wouldn't even contemplate that. The materials have already been purchased, so it's one of those things where we're not going to be able to go backwards on. But even if we did, first of all, I would say that in a future roundabout job, is that something that could be contemplated, at least approached with the state of Michigan? Sure, anything's possible. I will say, though, that looking at it from the perspective of others, I do think that safety-wise, that when you look at all the users of the intersections, that use that, not just from a standpoint of a property owner, the lights do provide a benefit. It does provide a safety function, hence why the state is adamant, MDOT, when I say the state, is adamant that we include that in the scope of work. So what we try to do is understanding that, all right, this will be a change to people that live within the project limits. What can we do to help minimize any type of spillover onto their property? So we've worked with Detroit Edison to be able to get a special type of lamp to be able to do just that. And if you were to drive some of our roundabouts, for instance, at Ann Arbor Saline Textile Road, South Church and Wagner Road, you'll see the same similar type of lamp post that's going to be provided for this job.
Okay, thank you for the question. Anybody else want to virtually raise their hand and ask Mark a question, or any other questions in chat? We do have a comment from Jill, Mark, with some more information about Salem Farms Estates, and they just appreciate us looking into this and working with the Sheriff's Department if there is aggressive cut through traffic. Sure. As Mark said, it is a little tricky because they are public roads, and so we can't close them because the tickets then for that closure, for violating that closure, would not be able to be enforced because it's a public road. But Salem Farms Estates, Mark, is off a 7 mile east of Pontiac Trail. So Jill, we will certainly look into that and monitor that throughout construction.
Writing that down.
Okay. I don't see any other raised hands. I do have a request for the website information. So let me get to that slide. So here is the contact information. To find the project page, you would go to wcroads.org, and then under the current projects tab, you can see we have a whole interactive map of all the projects we have across the county. This is actually, we're building 3 roundabouts this year. So it's a big roundabout year. So you can see all those different projects, including this project. And then on each project page, there's a link to be able to subscribe to receive project email updates. There's Mark's contact information. There'll be links to this slideshow and the meeting recording. And we'll be posting project updates there and emailing those out throughout construction. And as Mark mentioned as well, we will be sending out information, email advisories, putting out changeable message boards ahead of the actual road closure, which could start as early as June 1st, right, Mark?
Correct. I should know within by tomorrow.
Okay, so we will provide more information as we get closer. It doesn't look like there's any other questions. Deborah, we will reach out to you if you will message us your contact information. You can message me directly as the host, and I can share that with Mark. But we'll reach out directly to talk with you about your property concerns. But if there's no other general questions from the public, I think we will end it there. Again, contact information for Mark and the project page information is listed here. Mark, anything else? Any final words?
No final words. Thank you, everyone, for participating. It's a pleasure to serve the public.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. This is a good format for us, so we appreciate you joining virtually, and we look forward to construction. Thank you.